The amber light of Valesari's twin suns filtered through the crystalline spires of the capital city as Thomas Garrett made his way through the diplomatic quarter. 3 months into his assignment as cultural liaison, he'd settled into a comfortable routine of translation work, protocol briefings, and the occasional dinner with minor officials. Nothing had prepared him for the ornate scroll that arrived at his quarters that morning, bearing the unmistakable seal of the High Matron herself. The parchment felt warm to the touch, inscribed with flowing script in both Universal Standard and the elegant curves of ancient Valesarian. Thomas Garrett of Earth, you are formally summoned to attend the High Matron Valandra in her private chambers at the 20th hour. Come alone. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his formal diplomatic attire, a deep blue uniform that complemented his brown hair and green eyes. What could the High Matron possibly want with him? In his 3 months here, he'd caught only glimpses of her during ceremonial functions, a tall, ethereal figure with pale purple skin and cascading dark curls, always maintaining perfect composure while lesser nobles vied for her attention. The palace guard who escorted him spoke little, leading Thomas through corridors he'd never seen before. They passed beyond the public halls with their soaring ceilings and into more intimate spaces. The walls here were smooth obsidian inlaid with veins of silver, and the air carried the subtle scent of night-blooming jasmine, a flower that grew only in the High Matron's private gardens. Wait here, the guard instructed, leaving Thomas before towering doors carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the ethereal light. His heart hammered against his ribs. Had he committed some cultural faux pas? Offended someone important? The diplomatic protocols he'd memorized seemed woefully inadequate for whatever awaited him beyond those doors. The doors opened silently, revealing a chamber that took his breath away. Moonlight streamed through crystal windows, casting prismatic patterns across walls lined with books and artifacts from across the galaxy. And there, rising gracefully from a chair upholstered in midnight blue, was Valandra herself. She was even more breathtaking up close. Her pale purple skin seemed to glow in the soft light, and her dark eyes held an intelligence that made Thomas feel suddenly, acutely aware of every breath he took. When she spoke, her voice carried the melodic quality of her people, but there was something else, a warmth he'd never heard in her public addresses. Thomas Garrett, she said, stepping toward him with fluid grace. Thank you for coming. We have much to discuss. Thomas managed a formal bow, his diplomatic training kicking in despite his nervousness. High Matron, I am honored by your summons. How may I serve? She gestured to a pair of chairs arranged near a fireplace where blue flames danced without consuming their crystal logs. Please, sit. And call me Valandra. What I wish to discuss transcends formal protocol. He settled into the chair, hyper-aware of her graceful movements as she poured 2 glasses of an iridescent liquid from a crystal decanter. The wine, if it was wine, tasted like starlight and distant music, warming him from within. I have been observing you, Thomas, she began, her dark eyes never leaving his face. Your work with the trade delegations, your patience with our customs, your genuine curiosity about our people. But more than that, I have seen your character. Thank you, High Matron. I mean, Valandra. Her name felt strange on his tongue, intimate in a way that made his pulse quicken. She rose and moved to the window, silhouetted against the star-scattered sky. Among my people, there comes a time when one must choose. I am of age, and my position demands that I select a mate to father my heir. The council expects me to choose from among the noble houses, to forge political alliances through bloodlines. Thomas remained silent, sensing the weight of her words. But I will not be bound by their expectations. She turned back to him, her expression resolute. I have studied the genetic compatibility reports. I have watched potential suitors court me with empty flattery and transparent ambition. And I have observed you. His breath caught. I don't understand. You possess qualities that our people value above all others, intelligence that seeks to understand rather than dominate, compassion that extends to all beings, and a strength that comes not from conquest but from protection. She moved closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I want you to be the father of my heir. The words hit him like a physical blow. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the stone floor. You can't be serious. I have never been more serious about anything. She reached out, her fingers barely grazing his hand. This is not merely about duty or biology, Thomas. I am choosing you. Out of all the beings in this galaxy, I choose you to help me create something precious, a bridge between our peoples, a child who will carry the best of both our worlds. Thomas felt the room spinning. But I'm human. I'm nobody special. I translate documents and explain Earth customs to merchant guilds. You are wrong. Her voice carried absolute certainty. You are exactly what I need. What we need. He stared into her dark eyes, seeing depths of loneliness and responsibility he'd never imagined. Velandra, I consider it, she said softly. That is all I ask. Over the following days, Thomas found himself unable to concentrate on his usual duties. The weight of Velandra's proposal consumed his thoughts, and he was grateful when she sent word requesting his presence for dinner, not in her private chambers, but in a garden pavilion overlooking the city. She had changed from her formal robes into something simpler, a flowing dress that accentuated her graceful form. In the gentle light of floating crystal orbs, she looked less like the untouchable high matron and more like a woman carrying an enormous burden. You seem troubled, she observed as they shared a meal of delicate seafood and exotic fruits. Wouldn't you be? Thomas managed a weak smile. 3 days ago, I was worried about conjugating verbs correctly in your language. Now I'm considering this. Tell me what frightens you about it. He set down his fork, meeting her gaze. Everything. The responsibility, the politics, the fact that I know nothing about raising a child, let alone one who'll inherit a world. And. He hesitated. And. I don't want to be chosen just for my genetics. I don't want to be a stud animal in a breeding program. Her expression softened. Is that what you think this is? Isn't it? Velandra was quiet for a long moment. Thomas, in my culture, the choice of a mate is sacred. It is not merely about creating offspring, it is about choosing someone whose soul complements your own. Yes, I need an heir. But I could have chosen any of a dozen compatible species. I chose you because when I watch you work, when I see how you treat others, I feel peace. She reached across the table, her fingers intertwining with his. I have been alone for so long, surrounded by people who see only my title. But you see me. You ask about my thoughts, my dreams. You make me laugh. I make you laugh. Your expression when you tasted fermented kelp for the first time. A smile played at her lips. You were so determined to be polite, but your face. She laughed, and the sound was like silver bells. Thomas felt something shift inside him. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. She stood, moving around the table to stand beside him. You're kind. Genuine. And you make me feel like more than just a title. He rose to face her, and suddenly the space between them felt electric. Velandra. She stepped closer, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. I know this is overwhelming. But I need you to know, this isn't just about duty anymore. Not for me. His breath caught as she leaned toward him. Their first kiss was hesitant, tentative, but when their lips met, it was like a circuit completing. She tasted of starlight and possibilities, and when they broke apart, both were breathless. I'm falling for you, she whispered against his lips. I wasn't supposed to, but I am. Thomas cupped her face gently, marveling at the softness of her skin. I think I'm falling for you too. Thomas stood in his quarters, staring at his reflection in the polished mirror. Tonight, he would give Velandra his answer. The past week of shared meals, long conversations, and stolen moments had transformed his initial shock into something deeper, a connection he'd never expected to find among the stars. When he arrived at her chambers, she was waiting by the window, dressed in a gown that seemed to be woven from moonbeams and shadow. She turned as he entered, and he saw his own nervous anticipation reflected in her eyes. "Have you decided?" she asked softly. "Yes." He crossed the room to take her hands. "Yes, I'll do it. Not just because you asked, but because I want to. Because I want you." Her relief was palpable. "Thomas. I love you," he said, the words feeling both foreign and perfectly natural. "I don't know when it happened, but I love you. Not the high matron, not the title, you. Valandra." She pulled him closer, her voice thick with emotion. "I love you too. I never expected to feel this way about anyone." Their kiss was deeper this time, filled with promise and passion. When they broke apart, she led him toward her sleeping alcove, where gossamer curtains surrounded a bed carved from a single piece of opalescent stone. "Are you certain?" she whispered. "I've never been more certain of anything." What followed was tender and passionate, two souls finding solace in each other. Thomas marveled at the way her skin seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, how her touch sent electricity through his entire being. She guided him with gentle patience, showing him the subtle differences in their physiology, the places that made her gasp and arch against him. They moved together with increasing urgency, her soft cries of pleasure mingling with his own. When she wrapped her legs around him, pulling him deeper, he felt as though he was drowning in sensation. They found their rhythm, ancient and primal, two beings becoming one. "Thomas," she breathed against his ear, and the way she said his name was like a prayer. Afterward, they lay entwined, her head resting on his chest as their breathing slowly returned to normal. Her fingers traced lazy patterns on his skin, and he marveled at how perfectly she fit against him. "No regrets?" she asked softly. "None." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "What happens now?" "Now we build something beautiful together," she murmured. "Our child, our future, our love." As sleep claimed them, Thomas realized he had found something he'd never known he was searching for, not just love, but purpose. He was no longer just a cultural liaison, he was a father-to-be, a partner to a remarkable woman, and a bridge between worlds. 6 months later, Thomas stood in the royal gardens, watching Valandra as she rested her hands on her gently rounded belly. The pregnancy had been confirmed weeks ago, and the news had sent ripples of excitement and curiosity throughout the diplomatic community and beyond. "The little one is active today," she said, smiling as she felt the baby move. "I think they have your restless energy." Thomas moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his hands over hers. "Or your strength. They're already making their presence known." Their relationship had evolved far beyond the original arrangement. Thomas had moved into the royal quarters, taking on an advisory role in matters concerning human-Valsari relations. The council had been initially skeptical, but his genuine insight and Valandra's unwavering support had won them over. "The council meeting went well today," she said, leaning back against him. "They've approved the cultural exchange program you proposed." "Really? That's wonderful." Thomas kissed her temple. "Our child will grow up in a world where humans and Valsari truly understand each other." "Speaking of our child," Valandra turned in his arms, "I've been thinking about names. In my culture, the child traditionally receives names from both parents' lineages. I'd like that. Something that honors both our worlds." They were interrupted by a gentle chime from the communication device on Valandra's wrist. She activated it, and a holographic image of her chief medical advisor appeared. "Hi matron, it's time," the advisor said with barely contained excitement. "The birthing chamber is prepared." Thomas felt his heart skip. "Now. But you said we had another week." "Apparently, our child has their own timeline," Valandra said with a laugh that turned into a gasp as a contraction hit. Hours later, Thomas held his newborn daughter, marveling at her perfect features, a beautiful blend of human and Valsari traits. Her skin had a subtle lavender tint, and her eyes were the same deep brown as her mother's, but her hair was dark like Thomas's with hints of her mother's natural curl. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Kira Valandra Garrett," Valandra said softly, reaching up to touch their daughter's tiny hand. Kira, meaning light in your language, and Valandra, hope in mine. Thomas looked at his wife. They had married in a quiet ceremony 2 months prior, and their daughter, and felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had created together. Not just a child, but a symbol of unity between two peoples. "I love you both so much," he said, settling beside Valandra on the bed. "You gave me more than I ever dared hope for," she replied, her voice filled with wonder. "Not just an heir, but a family. A future." As little Kira slept peacefully in her father's arms, Thomas realized that his journey from simple cultural liaison to father and husband had been more than he could have ever imagined. He had helped create not just a bridge between worlds, but a new beginning for both their peoples. Their love story, he knew, would be remembered long after the stars themselves had faded, a testament to the power of choosing love over duty, and the beautiful legacy that such choices could create.